Hi everyone, welcome back. This is Kate at Wallace's Garden Center here, Bettendorf, Iowa. And today we are going to talk about deer. I live in a really wooded neighborhood. I deal with deer all the time. I know how some of you are feeling. I know the battles that you face. But there is a way to have a nice yard, have a garden, and deal with deer. So today we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about how to look for deer-resistant plants. And then we're going to also talk about some other manual and mechanical and chemical ways that you can deter deer from your yard, or at least from your most important plants that you do not want them to touch. Thanks for joining me, and we will get started and first start talking about some deer-resistant perennials. When you are looking for deer-resistant plants that they will leave alone, you want to think about the texture of the plant, the fragrance of the plant, and anything that would be kind of less appetizing for them. So one of the number one ways is to find plants that have pubescent or fuzzy or kind of furry leaves. So this is a lamb's ear, and it's got this real thick hair on it that makes it really soft and fuzzy and nice for us to touch, but the deer don't love to eat it so much. Another fuzzy leaf perennial that the deer tend to leave alone is gaillardia, or blanket flower. And this is just a really pretty heat-tolerant sun perennial. Stays fairly low, comes in shades of red, orange, and yellow. This is spin top red, and one of my favorites. These have really neat seed heads too. Once their blooming is done, they kind of have these little red balls, seed heads that add a lot of texture and interest to the garden as well. So blanket flower is going to be another fuzzy leaf plant. A great perennial for shade that is going to be deer resistant is pulmonaria, or lungwort. And if you feel these leaves, they're very, very scratchy and not very pleasant to touch. So definitely something that they are not going to want to eat. This is a shade plant, blooms in the spring, kind of little purple and pink flowers on there, sometimes blue, and definitely one that the deer will not touch. If you have trouble with them eating your hosta, and you have a lot of hosta in the shade, try mixing this in and see what happens for you there. One last fuzzy leaved plant that I like to use that can go in partial sun or partial shade is a stilbe, or false spirea. This is one called dark side of the moon. This plant not only has fuzzy leaves, it has fuzzy stems, and actually the flowers, when they come up on their spikes, are actually kind of fuzzy themselves. So this is one that will give you some color in partial shade, and hopefully the deer will leave it alone. Another thing to look for when you are trying to find deer-resistant plants is to not only look for things that have fuzzy leaves, but things that have a lot of fragrance to them. So anything in the mint family. This is a lavender plant. I love putting lavender in the garden because the fragrance is pleasant to us, not pleasant for the deer, and it's heat tolerant. It really blooms a ton. The bees love it, so it's a great pollinator plant. So it kind of has all kinds of boxes that it checks for being a great perennial in a Midwest garden. Another plant that has fragrant foliage that's very strongly fragrant that the deer tend to avoid is Russian sage. This is a nice, really strong foundation perennial that can be kind of a centerpiece of a garden. Blooms midsummer to late, awesome kind of blue-purple spikes of flowers, and definitely attracts pollinators and also keeps the deer away. Another fragrant foliage plant that is a great bloomer is agastache, or anise hyssop. And this is a plant that has fragrant foliage. It's a member of the mint family, and it is also a great pollinator plant. And it's a perennial that blooms like an annual. It gives you really long, summer-long blooms, attracts bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds, and is something the deer won't touch. You may have noticed that the one thing all of these have in common is their texture. So another texture that the deer tend not to like is the kind of a ferny fern leaf texture with this real fine leaves. So this is yarrow, very long blooming sun perennial. It's also a great pollinator plant. But this and any perennial ferns that you have in your garden are going to have a texture that the deer dislike. Another texture for leaves to look for when you're trying to find deer-resistant plants is a kind of a succulent, a real thick kind of rubbery texture. That is something the deer tend to stay away from, and there are lots of great sedums that do great in our yards, heat tolerant, drought tolerant, and great pollinator attractors. This succulent type plant is sempervivum, also known as hens and chicks, and it has a little bit of a spike to it. It's definitely something that they don't want to eat, And it also is something that spreads in the garden, makes a great ground cover, and can fill in those real hot, kind of rocky, dry places in the garden. And it provides a great ground cover and some interesting color, texture, and design to any garden. Another leaf texture to look for is something that is real thick and leathery. And the best example of that are the hellebores or Lenten roses. These are shade perennials. They bloom in early spring, and they have just these really, really tough, leathery leaves. They're really hard to rip. And this is as close to being deer proof as I've ever seen. Everything can be deer resistant, and there's always going to be a deer out there that proves me wrong. This is a plant that I've never seen the deer touch. Blooms in the spring, works in the shade, and just a really, really thick, tough, leathery leaves. Great for any shade garden. Another plant that has kind of that thick, leathery foliage is a shrub, is butterfly bush. And this is another great pollinator plant, blooms in the sun, lots of great colors to choose from, and a nice, thick, kind of leathery foliage that the deer will leave alone. The last category of deer-resistant plants that I want to talk about today are the ornamental grasses. They have, again, a texture that the deer tend to leave alone, and they provide so many other great uses in our garden. They add movement, they add height and kind of this gracefulness. They're also great protection for pollinators and attract birds throughout the fall and the winter. Despite our best efforts to plant all deer-resistant plants in our garden, sometimes we wake up in the morning and they have decided to join us for breakfast, and there they are. There are some human, chemical, manual ways that we can also interfere and try to deter those deer from coming into our yard and messing with our plants. Kind of one of the most old-fashioned ways is to use netting, and this works great, especially if you have a vegetable garden that they keep wreaking havoc in. Sometimes the only way to keep them out of it is to actually put up a physical barrier. Not the most attractive solution, but if you have a lot of deer in your neighborhood like I do, most of my neighbors do have fences and nets around their vegetable gardens to keep them safe. If that is not an option for you, there are a lot of different smell repellents that keep deer away in various different ways. So one of our best sellers is to use a liquid repellent. This is Liquid Fence. And Liquid Fence is a combination of garlic oil and egg solids and dried blood and all kinds of things that deer really dislike. And they last, they're rainproof, so once they're dry, they'll last 6 to 8 weeks in the garden. You do have to reapply if your plant has new growth that comes out after you've sprayed. And the downfall of this is if you spray it near your back patio or your front porch, we as humans can also smell the same smells, and it's not super pleasant. So this is an option that we do sell a lot of, but it's definitely not something that works in every situation. Also with the Liquid Fence, this is not something that is recommended to be sprayed on edibles or vegetables. They do make a hot pepper spray that you can spray on your vegetables and herbs. Just make sure, of course, that you're always washing everything before you eat it. But that is the Go Away deer and rabbit repellent. This is safe for use on edibles. If you don't see it listed that it's safe for use, then don't use it. For our fruit tree growers, one of our most recommended products is this Deer No-No soap. And this really is literally just bar soap that is in these little mesh bags, and you hang them in your trees. Our fruit tree grower, this is what he recommends in his own orchard, and what he uses is this really, really fragrant soap. You may read online a lot of times to use Irish Spring. That's a very strong scented soap. This has a very similar smell to it, but it is a nice kind of organic way, great to use on edibles, and tends to last most of the season for you. So that is the Deer No-No soap repellent. The last kind of smell repellent that is an unpleasant thing for them, this is garlic oil and soybean oil. These are deer and rabbit clips. So you can actually take these little plastic scented things and clip them right onto your plants, or onto your tomato cage, or onto your fence if you want an added layer of protection. So these little clips are perfect for kind of sticking anywhere where you're just trying to kind of target and keep them away. So this is garlic oil, so it will have a strong scent of garlic and keep the deer away. My favorite deer deterrent that I use in my yard is deer repellent that comes in these little plastic cases. And what is in here is actually granular dried blood. And dried blood is something that when the deer smell it, it signals a fear response in them. They think there's a predator in the area and they stay away. This product comes 6 to a package, and it comes with either a metal stake so you can stick it into the garden, or it actually has a little hole on the top, and I just take plastic zip ties and I zip tie them right into my trees. Especially when I plant something new trees and shrubs, I will put these right into the tree. So these guys last the whole season. They're also dark green in color, so when they're out hanging in my trees, I don't see them. They're not an eyesore in my landscape. They just kind of blend in, help keep the deer away from my prized plants, and just kind of do their job all summer long. The last deterrent product that we have for deer is this kind of motion activated sprinkler. So you have to hook this up to the end of your hose, and then it has a spike. It's solar powered, and when the deer come into your yard or come near, it's motion activated and it starts spraying out water. This will usually startle them. It's something they're not used to, and so they tend to just avoid it because they are unsure of it. So I've never tried this, so if you try it at home, let us know how you think it works, but it is something that we do have available. Also fun for your kids. Thanks for joining me today as we talk about how to keep deer from eating everything in your landscape. Please keep in mind that everything that I talked about, these plants, they are deer resistant. And unfortunately, I don't think there's anything that is deer proof. Despite our best efforts, there may be some times where you still have them browsing on some of your perennials. I just think of it as a free pruning service sometimes. I do enjoy having some of the deer in my backyard. So come talk to us, share your struggles, and see if we can help you find some new deer resistant plants to mix into your landscape and make your yard prettier and more deer resistant at the same time.